Hyrule in Breath of the Wild is a sad and somber sight with widespread destruction and the ruins of a once powerful Hylian civilization as far as the eye can see. At the epicenter of this tragedy stands a princess trapped in a century-long war against the greatest of evils. But Princess Zelda's fate is much more heartbreaking than we could initially imagine. She hasn't only lost her kingdom, but also her closest family members, everyone but Link, who she barely managed to keep alive. And, for everyone wondering, this video will contain heavy spoilers from the backstory of Breath of the Wild and the final dungeon, Hyrule Castle. Deep inside the confines of Hyrule Castle, woe behind an army of guardians and the guardian drones, are Zelda's research room, probably the hardest memory of the past to unlock, and finally, Zelda's bedroom. Within these two chambers we can read the scientific note of Zelda's extensive research of ancient Sheikah technology, and the princess's personal diary from the final weeks and days leading up to Calamity Ganon's invasion. The research notes give a depiction of a deeply concerned but, at the same time, dedicated princess desperate to locate every ancient tool, in particular the Sheikah Slate, the Guardian and Divine Beast weapons, and even the Resurrection Shrine medical facility to strengthen the probability of victory in the looming struggle. There was a good reason for this, as the notes are followed by some rather honest and personal doubts and reservations found in the young and pressured princess's diary. Princess Zelda's past is complicated and full of disappointments, as she was seriously anxious to fail Link, her father, and the other four champions, and the land of Hyrule, in the wake of Calamity Ganon.
As Princess of Hyrule, Zelda was, since her birth, destined to play a key role in the foretold Sealing War, and Zelda's childhood was beside preparations filled with excavations of ancient Sheikah technology ordered by her father. However, the young princess's life took a tragic turn when at the age of 6, her mother and presumed teacher, the Queen of Hyrule, passed away. From the diary of the princess and the journal of the king, it is clear that despite not showing it at the time, Zelda heavily resented over her mother's death, and that this loss had a serious impact on her later struggles and difficulties at unlocking the sealing power that had been gifted across the royal bloodline. At the age of 7, Zelda, under the close watch of her father, began her spiritual training, but without a teacher, books, or transcripts, this was easier said than done. When the early attempts to unleash this great power failed, King Rome continued to pressure his daughter. As father, he may have felt guilty for this cause of action, but as the King of Hyrule, faced by the danger of Calamity Ganon, he had no choice but to be strict toward his daughter. The preparations for the inevitable invasion continued for the next 10 years, but despite deep devotion, no results could be traced from Zelda's training. The king, fearing the downfall of his kingdom, grew more and more impatient over the fact that his own daughter, despite years of spiritual training, had failed to unleash her sealing power. But other matters were of greater urgency. Since 5 new champions were to be appointed, Link, the Hylian champion who was chosen by the Master Sword, was delegated as Zelda's personal knight, while Daruk of the Goron, Revali of the Rito, Mipha of the Zora, and Urbosa of the Gerudo tribes were bound to pilot the divine beasts.
Over the next few weeks and days, Zelda supervised the preparations of the divine beasts and their pilots, while continuing her research of the many locked mysterious shrines. Following her on this journey was Link, who annoyed Zelda and eventually caused the princess to lash out her inner frustration at this silent knight. Zelda, who was under great pressure at this time, quickly regretted her condescending posture towards Link. She soon learned that Link dealt with similar pressure, trying to live up to the expectations of an entire world and kingdom awaiting his victory against Ganon with the blade of the evil's bane in his hand. Link and Zelda grew to each other as her personal knight protected the princess from the sickles of the Yiga clan and the greater waves of monsters. Nonetheless, Zelda's obsession of discovering and continued research of the ancient Sheikah technology made King Rome to lose his patience and temper. He confronted his daughter in Link's presence and ordered her to have nothing more to do with the refurbishment of Sheikah weapons and instead concentrate on training to free her sealing power. This strict and powerful message hit the princess hard, but was not enough to free the power and the great burden. In the last days prior to the invasion, Zelda grew desperate as no progress could be traced in her efforts at the Spring of Power and Courage. With her 17th birthday around the corner, she left all hope in praying at the Spring of Wisdom. The more and more anxious king did not attend his daughter's birthday, and Zelda, seeing herself as a failure in the eyes of her father, Link, and the other champions, set out for Mount Lanayru. Her father would have to wait until her return. Things did not go well in the Lanayru province as Link and Zelda failed in their prayers and had to return in defeat to the other champions after another failure. Just as things couldn't possibly get worse, Ganon struck mercilessly. But even this torment was not sufficient to unleash Zelda's sealing power. As a result, Link and Zelda's eventual effort in the confrontation against Calamity Ganon was for naught.
Instead, the worst nightmare turned into reality. Calamity Ganon corrupted and took over the Guardians, and then sent his twisted creations to the divine beasts. It was in these skirmishes that Daruk, Rivali, Mipha, and Urbosa lost their lives. The Guardians turned against their masters, and in the subsequent aftermath, the king and the other inhabitants of Hyrule Castle and town perished. Link and Zelda had no other option but to escape. Burdened by the prospect of total failure and the downfall of Hyrule Kingdom, Princess Zelda mourned over her own personal failure, which had cost the life of her father, the champions, and most of the Hylians. But there was no time to grieve, as Hop resided at Fort Hateno. It was here that the two made their last stand. Surrounded by corrupted guardians, Link refused to run and shielded Zelda, but soon one of the guardians set aim at the gravely wounded Link. Out of desperation and love to Link, Zelda finally managed to conquer her reservations and free her sealing power. With it, the princess turned the approaching guardians into scrap, but even this could not prevent Link from collapsing in her arms. As his life was fading away, Zelda noticed that the Master Sword still responded to its master, and ordered two approaching Sheikah warriors to bring the corpse of the Hylian champion to the medical facility at the Resurrection Shrine.
But Zelda wasn't done, since after consulting Empire about her decision and returning the Master Sword back to its pedestal and the Great Deku Tree, she finally forced her way into Hyrule Castle. With her activated sealing powers, she confronted Calamity Ganon, and with it, the 1 century-long battle to keep him cowered in the castle and the restoration of Hyrule began. The only hope Zelda had left in this 100-year-long hell was Link's eventual return and retribution against Calamity Ganon. If this isn't motivating to save Zelda from Ganon, then we don't know what is. Zelda is not a whiny princess in Breath of the Wild, but a determined and abashed girl whose youth was ruined by Calamity Ganon, a primal evil which had forced a struggling princess to face the loss of her loved ones, and rescue her only loved Link from certain death. Despite standing against all odds, confronted Calamity Ganon on her own and fought the monstrosity for the next 100 years.
Thank you so much for watching. Make sure to like, share, comment, and most importantly subscribe to not miss any future episodes of Inside Zelda Breath of the Wild, and help us on the path to 100,000 subscribers. And for the next episode we will give you the following choice: the Champions of Hyrule or Guardians and Divine Beasts.
Finally, we need your help on Patreon to bring Jason Dameron, the voice overlord, more often for this series. Just check the card or the description below to support this show and channel for the greatest in-depth Zelda and Nintendo content. Until then, and the complete Zelda timeline in a few days, this was the Commonwealth Realm, and we will see you girls and guys later.